So I believe we're at the Mishnah on Samach Amud Aleph, right? Rafal? That sounds right.
Yes. Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Leyiftach ha'adam l'chatzer ha'shutvin Pesach keneged Pesach, Chaloi keneged Chaloi. Person is not allowed to have a door opposite someone else's door or a window opposite someone else's window in a chatzer ha'shutvin, meaning a jointly owned chatzer, and he has a house there. He can't have his door or his window directly opposite someone else's. This is separate from what we had in the first parak about Hezekiah, about opening up in general, and where the person building a wall opposite it. This is talking about one opposite each other, which is a separate din, and then you're not allowed to have. That means you don't have a chazaka for it. Even if you had it like that for 3 years, you still have to remove it, as the Gemara is going to explain, because it's a chesaron and tznius. This is what Bilam plays. We'll see. Bilam praised the Bnei Yisrael that Matayvo Yalecha Yaakov. We all learned that in Chumash, that they don't have doors opening into other people's doors. You don't have a direct line of sight from one door to the other. It's a lack of privacy. If someone had a small door or window, he can't make it larger. Really, we're talking about doors. If he had one door, he can't make two. The Gemara is going to explain what the details of that are. Pesach keneged Pesach, v'chaloin keneged chaloin. This is all in a chatzer ha'shutvin, which is a chatzer jointly owned chatzer. So there are people who have their houses. There's some expectation of privacy. People use the chatzer, but it's only the people of the chatzer who use it. But in Rosh Hashanah, there's no such din that if you are on one side of Quentin Avenue and the other person has a house the other side of Quentin Avenue, there's no din that you can't have doors that are opposite one another. As the Gemara will explain, for the obvious reason that once you're already open to the Sharabim, it doesn't make a difference that there's a door open on the other side. You anyway don't have any privacy. However, if you have a small, and the same thing, just like we said in the Sharabim, there's no problem of making it one opposite the other. If you have a small door, you can make it larger, and if you have one, you can make it into two. Because again, there's no expectation of privacy. Where does this come from? Where does the problem with having open doors, having a door that is opposite another door? Bilam picked up his eyes. He saw the Yidden living as Shvatim. What was he that he saw? As the Rashbam says, the pasuk continues and says, Bilam said, so we understand that the taiva, the goodness of the Yidden's ayhalim, of their tents, is that they were not one opposite, the entrances were not opposite one another. Amar, therefore Bilam said, therefore Bilam said that it's Roy, the Yidden are so such a Am Kaddish, that the Roy, that the Shechina of the Rebbein Shalom should rest by them. The Mishnah continued, if a person has a small door opening into a Rishus HaChatzer HaShutvin, he can't make it large. If someone has a door that's 4 amos wide, he can't make it 8 amos wide. Why not? Because if you remember all the way back in the first parak, we learned that if you have a chatzar that is divided up, when you divide up between the shutvin, before you make the cheshbon, before you make the division, you first give everyone for each door that they have into the chatzar, you give 4 amos around that door. So if you're going to make a second door, that's going to add to this person's rights when it comes to the later division, when they decide to divide up the chatzar. So therefore, we don't allow someone to make a second door, because then that will give him more ownership in the chatzar. That was Ram Bachama's svar of why you can't take one and make it bigger. He says, But therefore, if that's the reason, there's no problem with taking a door that's 2 amas and making it 4 amas, because you still have the same amount of space. You haven't increased your rights when the dissolution of the partnership comes. Amalei Rava said no. That's not really what the cheshbon is about. Motzei Amalei, he could still, even in that case, he could still stop him from doing it. That really he could stop him. She agrees with him that you can't make a bar dalid, a 4 amma door into an 8 amma door. But it's for a different reason. It's because of tznius. And therefore, even if it was 2 amas and he makes it into 4, Motzei Amalei, he would say, he'd tell him the problem is not what's going to happen at the end when we dissolve the partnership. The problem is currently that if you have a larger door, I'm going to have a harder time keeping myself private from your prying eyes. If you have a larger door, it's easier for you to look in. And we said also, if he has 1 door, he can make it into 2. Rabbi Chama went with the same svara. Tray. If he has 1 door of 4 amas, he can't make it into 2 separate Beit Trey Bnei Tarti. He can't make 2, each one of 2 amas, even though he's not increasing his total size of door. He had 1 4 amma door, now he makes it into 2 separate 2 amma door to Gashakal Tamli B'Chatzer. By splitting it in the same space into 2 doors, he's going to now get 4 amas for each door. So he's going to get more when they break up the partnership. But to take 1 door that's 8 amas and divide it into 2 4 amma doors, it's not a problem, because beforehand when there was 8 amas, he was entitled to 8 amas opposite in the chatzar, and he still is entitled to the same 8 amas opposite the 2 doors. Rava says no. The svara is again, like we said, because of tznius, and therefore the bnei chatzar can still object to dividing up an 8 amma door into 2 4 amma doors, because even though they're taking up the same amount of space, the doors are the same width, but 2 doors is different angles. Have to worry about 1 door being closed and the other door being open, whereas in the past they just had to look, and if that door was closed, it was closed. The Mishnah continues, and Pesach keneged Pesach, and to Sharabim he could open up, it's not a problem. In the Sharabim it's not a problem, because you always have to be concerned about people in the Sharabim are always passing by, so the fact that there's a door opposite is irrelevant. Start the Mishnah. One is not allowed to dig a pit or a ditch or a cave underneath the Rosh Hashanah, meaning you dig a hole and then you cover it over the way the Rashbam explains it, and the Gemara is going to explain. He covers it over with a healthy covering, so it's well protected that no one's going to fall in immediately. Rabbi Eliezer disagrees. He says no, as long as it is a sufficiently robust covering that it could carry a wagon that's holding bricks, holding stones, that's enough. So the Tanakama disagrees. As the Gemara is going to explain, we'll see the Gemara, and then we'll look at the Rashbam there. One cannot, we came across this Gemara, this Mishnah earlier in the Gemara. If one has a house that borders on the Sharabim, he can't have protuberances, like a kaira, a beam that sticks out into the Sharabim, because someone could bang the head into it. However, if he wants, he can move back the wall of his house so that it's inset from the Sharabim Tefach, and then he can make something sticking out into that Tefach. If someone buys a chatzar and it already has and includes houses that are that are adjoining the Sharabim, and there are things sticking out from that house into the Sharabim, and this person doesn't know the origin of these gzustarois. He doesn't know if it came about because the person stuck something into their Shirabim illegally, or if it's because he made his wall away from the Shirabim, and he just put this thing sticking out into that area that he created. So you say someone who buys it does not have to worry. He doesn't have to prove that it was made legally. The assumption is that the owner before must have done it in the proper way by first insetting his house. So now the Gemara goes back to the first thing we said in the Mishnah. We said, Ein oisen chalal techas shirab baris yuchnumaris. The Tanna Kama said you're not allowed to make a pit in the shirab and then cover it up. Even though it's a strong covering, Rabbi Elazar disagrees. He says, if it's a strong enough covering that it's going to last even from the heaviest wagon, then it's okay. The Tanna Kama says, no, it's not okay. Rabbanan, the Gemara says, so why do the Rabbanan disagree? If it's covered over, it's not going to break. What's the problem? It says, Zimlin de mafchas v'lav because the Bnei Shirabim have a right to stop. We don't want to have something that will eventually, at some point, it's going to, it has some lifespan, whether it's 10 years or 20 years or 30 years, at some point it's going to break. So we don't want people making holes, even if they're covered. As those of us who have been in Flatbush over the last 2 months, I don't know if you noticed, but they're digging up all the streets over the years, all the utilities and construction. Eventually, the streets are full of potholes and depressions. So now they're digging them all up and repaving them. Maybe it's only in Flatbush and not in Marine Park. I don't know. So we said one is not allowed to make something stick out, build something sticking out into the Rishra. Rab Ami Havale Ziza the Havanafik Lumavoya. Rab Ami had a house and he had a beam sticking out into the Mavi next to it. But who governed Nami Havale Ziza to have a Mapik L'Sharam? There was another fellow who had a beam that stuck out into the Risharam. Also the Kamei de Rav Ami. He came to Rav Ami to complain. This guy has a beam sticking into the Risharam. Amalei Zil Koitz. He said to Rav Ami said to him, you got to cut down your thing. You're not allowed to have it. Like the Mishnah said, you can't have something sticking into the Risharam. Amalei Vamar Nami Islay. Said, but the guy answered back, it was Mechutzef. He said to Rav Ami, but you also have something sticking into the Mavi. So Amalei Didi. I have it into a mavi. I went and asked all the people. I sent around the paper, and they all signed that they're okay with it. Sharabim, it's impossible for them to be meichel. You can't go collect everyone in Sharabim, and that's why you have to take it down. Rabbi Yanai had a tree that went to the Sharabim. We had this before also. A tree is only allowed if it's above the level of which the gomel is the highest, the tallest riding animal. So above the level of a rider of a gomel is okay, but if it's lower than that, it could knock off someone's hat. I don't know if anyone, when the trees are full of leaves in Flatbush, very often you'll be walking along and the tree will knock off your hat. So Havahu Gavra the Havale Nami Ilan Anaitalushram. Rav Yanai had such a tree, and he had not taken it away. There was another fellow that also had a tree that came into the Risharabim. Also Bnei Risharabim, and the townsmen of the city came to Havakama Akvi Aluya. They came and they said, they told this Gavra, you have to take down your tree. Also the Kamei de Rav Yanai. They came to Rav Yanai to complain, this fellow has a tree that's in the Risharabim. So Rav Yanai said, Zilla Edna V'Salamacha. He told them, I can't answer the question now, come back tomorrow. That night, he went and cut down his own tree that was also infringing on the Rosh Hashanah. The next day, this Gavra came back together with the people complaining, and this guy thought he's going to get Rav Yanai. Rav Yanai he's going to sandbag him. Amalei Zil Kaitz. Rav Yanai said, you got to cut it down. Amalei Amar Nami Yislay. He said, but Rav Yanai, you also have a tree in the Rishabim. Amalei Zil Chazi. Go check. If mine is cut down, you cut down yours. We like kites. We like to kites. It's me. Like to kites at. And he said, but if mine is cut down, then you don't have to. And of course, he had already cut it down. So I want to ask, if Rabbi Yanai knew the halacha is that you have to cut it down, why did he first cut it down when he heard that the Shiloh was coming to him. That's Allah. He should have done it beforehand. So he thought the Bnei Shirabim were happy to have the tree there. He thought the tree provided shade, and it was a benefit to the Shirabim, and therefore they were Motzei. Even the Chazor, the Kamakvi, since he saw that they were complaining about this other fellow who had a tree in the Shirabim, Shader Katya. He went and he cut it down because he understood that it wasn't the benefit that people were bothered by it. Why did he have to do this thing? That he had to tell him, come back the next day, and then go cut his own, and then have the guy come back? Why didn't he just tell the guy, the halacha is you got to cut it down? If the guy will complain, he'll and then after the guy complains, he'll cut down his, but at least get them cut down as quickly as possible. So the Mishum de Reish Lakish, the Amar is kaishishu v'kaishu. We darshan, the pasuk says, remove the straw from you, and then afterwards remove from the other person the straw. Which he darshan to mean kshait atzimcha v'achkach kshait acherim. Is a very good klal in life. Before you go criticizing someone else for something, first fix it by yourself. Yeah. So if you're telling someone not to talk during davening, first make sure you yourself don't talk by davening. Zok the Mishnah. The Mishnah said, if someone wants to have a protuberance from his wall into the Shirabim, he has to inset his wall away from the Shirabim and put it on his own property. So the Rashbam explains this, and the Gemara is going to make it somewhat clear. Question is, if someone inset his own wall, but he didn't put anything sticking out, and then after it's been like that for a while, he said, you know what, I want to stick something out. So the question is, do you say the Rosh Hashanah has sort of taken over this space, and it's too late for him at this point to decide to put his beam sticking out into the Rosh Hashanah there? Motzei. Reish Yochanan says, since he inset his wall, so it's really his own property, so therefore he can put it out there. Reish Lakish says, no, once you already were machnes your wall, that became part of the Shirabim, it's too late to put anything in. Amalei Rav Yaakov Rav Yirmiyah bar Tachlifa. Rav Yaakov bar Rav Yirmiyah said to Rav Yirmiyah bar Tachlifa, Asbralach, I'm going to explain to you. He had a different version of what this question was and what the answer was. Everyone will agree that if you inset your property, even if you didn't immediately make a beam sticking out, it's you are certainly able to do it at a later time. It's your own property, and you never intended to give it to the Shirabim. And the whole question was, can you later on change your mind? You have moved back your wall from the Shirabim, and everyone's been walking on that part. Can you then just change your mind and move it back to the edge of your property? Itmar. And the argument was really the other way around. If Yochanan was the one who said, you can't bring the wall back, it becomes part of the, like the Gemara is going to explain, according to Rabbi Yehuda, like we've had this before, they used to have these raised borders between fields, and sometimes people would start to use that as a shortcut to walk between the fields. They'd walk on that raised portion. So Yehuda says, once the Rabbim uses it as their pathway, that's as their alley to walk on, no, you can't afterwards take away that rishus. You can't take it away from the Shirab. Rish Lakish says you can undo it. So the same thing over here. Zok the Gemara. Why does he say machzer? That which we said that's something that belongs to a rabbin, you can't take away. That means this raised path that everyone was using, if you're going to take it away, they're not going to have a way to walk. But over there, there's no other option. Over here, there was a Rosh Hashanah before, so you made it a little wider. But if you make it smaller, then it'll go back to the way it was before. But people will still have the full Rosh Hashanah to walk on. If someone purchased the chutzner, we said you can't put into a sharabim zizim v'gzusterois. The only way you could do it is by insetting your wall and placing it on your own rishus. But if you buy something, you can assume that it was done properly. Amr Huna, nafla chayzeru baina isa. Huna says, even if you did it properly and it fell down, you can go and rebuild it with the gzusterois. Meisvei fragt the Gemara, ein mesaydin ve'ein mechayim ve'ein mefaychen. This is the next Gemara is going to be about the din of a zeichel l'chorban. We all think like it's like some Rabbi Yehuda Halevi, but this is a Gemara that when you build a house, your house has to have a zeichel, and like the Gemara is going to say, you have to leave a part. You can't cover your house entirely with white lime. And you can't engrave it. And you can't paint it with pictures. After the Churban Abayis. Lokach chotzer mesuyedes mechuyeres mefuchayes. If you bought a chotzer with houses that already had these embellishments, it was already white and it was already sculpted and it was already painted. Harezu bechaskasa. Then it's b'chazkasa, meaning that we can assume b'chazaka that it was built like that before the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. It's not talking about Bisman Hazeh in America. It's talking about in Eretz Yisrael. Nafla ein chayzu b'ayna isa. But if it falls down, even though you could assume when you bought it that it was built properly, if it falls down, you can't rebuild it the same way because we're mesupik that maybe it wasn't, we're not 100% sure that it was built before the bias. So it's one thing to leave it the way it is, but to rebuild it, you can't assume that it was built before the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. So, practically, why is it different over here? Why do we say over here that legabi this din that you are not allowed to infringe on the Rishus Harabim with your gzustera, with your ziz, that we say if you buy it, you can assume it was done properly. But if it falls, and even if it falls down, you can rebuild it. But legabi the isser of that you have to have a zeichel l'chorban, we say you can't assume it was rebuilt properly. The Gemara Isur Shani. It says an isser is different, meaning not that not like it seems that we're more machmer on an isser. I think that the Taisus explains at the end of the Taisus Nafla Chayzer. Mishani Yisur Shain, Afilu Vaday Nivne Beheter. Even if it was something that's Isser, even if it was written Beheter, Ki Nafla Asal of Noisel L'Sayim. It's because it's an Isser, that's part of the Gzeir, that we don't build things that don't have a Zeichel L'Chorban. So it's inherently different. The din is different than our din about a Ziz. A Ziz is a monistic question. Are you responsible to take it away or not? So we say, you can go with the Chazaka that it was built properly. But over here, the din of the Zeichel L'Chorban, there's a Gzeira that you shouldn't build in a manner that does not make a Zeichel for the Chorban. So if you're being binded again, you have to build it with the Zeichel. So now we're just going to talk about the Binyan Beis Hamikdash, which is very appropriate in the Shiva Dinacham. Tanur Rabban. A person should not make his house all white with sid, with lime, but if he mixes into it sand or straw, it's mutter because that takes away from the brightness of the lime. If he mixes in sand, that makes it into like a harder type of concrete. But also, you're making it better. You're improving it by adding in sand. Teven mutter, but Teven taka makes it better. When the second Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, Rabu Prushim b'Yisrael. There were many Prushim, many people who were ascetic. They wanted to take away from themselves all. They were very upset, distressed. They wanted to take away from themselves Tanugi Olam Hazeh. So lechol basa, they wouldn't eat meat. Lishlish yain, they wouldn't drink wine. Nitval and Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Yeshua did not approve of this. He engaged in conversation with them. Amalem b'ni. Why are you abstaining from meat and from wine. They said to him, how can we eat basar? That's what they brought in the mizbeach. The achshav bottle, and now the mizbeach is bottle. Nishta yain shemenaskin al gabe mizbeach. We should drink wine that they used to pour on the mizbeach. The achshav bottle. Amalahem Yeshua said back to him, "In came lechem nechel shekvat bottle benachis." You used to bring bread as a mincha, so you shouldn't eat bread either. After Paris, they said, you're right. That just goes to show you when you engage with people who are extremists, very hard to win an argument by saying you're going too far. They said, we'll just eat Paris. We won't eat lechem. She said, Paris leinechel shekfar batlu bikurim. They were brought it to bikurim, so you can't even eat that. After Paris acherim, he said, okay, we just won't eat the sheva, the sheva, the 7 things, the 7 types of Paris that are brought as bikurim. We'll eat the others. That the ones that the soul is gebenched with. They said to Mayim leinishta shekvar bottle nisach hamayim. He said we can't drink water because they used it for nisach hamayim. That's bottle. Shosku. At that point, he had them trapped. Amulem beneath. Said to them, my sons, I'm not going to tell you not to be misabel. Shekvar nigzer gzeira. There is a gzeira, it means the Beis Hamikdash is destroyed, and we do have to be misabel. And to make a gzeira that like you're suggesting, and not to eat basar or not to drink wine, that's not possible. You can't make a gzeira on the tzibur unless most of the tzibur can stand with it. The chsiv. He said this is in, I think, in Yeshaya. B'me'erat and ne'erim v'oisiatem koivim hagoy kula in Malachi. I'm sorry, that there was a gzeira that the people made on themselves, that anyone, the Bnei Yisrael made upon themselves, that they have to separate. Anyone who doesn't separate the Trumas and Maasros should be cursed, and they accepted upon themselves. So he said, the Rebbeinu Shalom said back to them, "You put this curse on yourself by not you made this curse on yourself, and then you didn't fulfill it. That you ended up you stole from me by not giving the Trumas and Maasros." So the Gemara says on this, you see that the Olam is able to make. They were able to make a klala to keep the Trumas and Maasros, because that was something that Roiv of the Tzibur was able to accept. So therefore, what is the gzeira that we make to be mesavel on Yerushalayim? Sad odom is basic besid. Person should plaster his house, mashaya by davar mut, and should leave over a small portion. Rav Yosef amalama. 1 amma by an amma, by 1.5 feet or 2 feet by 2 feet. Amar Chizda Keneged Pesach. It should be opposite the doorway. Person should make everything he needs for the suda. He should leave over something. Mahi Amar Papa Kasa the Harsana. It's like a certain type of fried fish. A woman should make everything, prepare everything. Mishayeres davar mut. She leave over something. Mahi Amar Rav Bas Tzada. You should leave over by her temple. They used to either put on some perfume or prepare her hair in a certain way. So you should leave that over. So these 3 things should be done as avelos for Yerushalayim. Shenema imishkachich Yerushalayim tishkach yemini tidbak l'shoni l'chigi. When I forget Yerushalayim, I should forget the strength of my right hand, and my tongue should stick to the roof of my mouth. My al roish simchasi. The pasuk continues. This is the ashes that we put on the head of a chassan. Where do you put it? The makom tefillin. You put it on the makom tefillin. Shenema losum la'avli losus lahem per tachas afer. We make for the avli yishal tzion that they should make a pe'er. Tefillin are called a pe'er. and we make that underneath the offer. You place the offer on the makam of the pair. Whoever is properly Misav Yishalayim will be Zaycha to see the Simcha. Shenaba Simcha Yishalayim. Tanya Yishmael ben Elisha Miyayim Shechar Beis Hamikdash Dinu Shenigzar Al Atzmenu Shalalecha Bas V'Lalishtas Yain. He said basically the same thing that we just said, that it really should be that we should make a gzeira not to eat bas or drink wine. I think it's not feasible for everyone to be aimed. From the time that Edom, Rome, put on us gzeirus, terrible gzeirus, they stopped us from being mekayim the mitzvahs. They don't allow us to make a bris. Some people say to make a pigeon haben. The emes is we should make a gzeira that people shouldn't get married and have children. So Taisus explains. Taisus asked the obvious question: how could you make a gzeira that people shouldn't get married and have children? It's Motzei midaraisa. The Shemal Oisa Shekvar Kimu Piravirvi Kamar. Behind the Sarish Avram Kolish Yoyel Ben Vas. That we're going to say in a minute that if you would follow this, it would make the Bnei Avram stop, meaning that they only have a son and a daughter. So we're only talking about we should have made a gzeira that after people were Makayim Piravirivya, they shouldn't get married anymore. So dinner who shenigzar al atzmei at least yishal haylabanim. B'nimtza zar shel Avram Avinu kala would turn out that population would decrease if people only had 2 children. Me'elav elahanach lahem yisrael mutav shiyush shaygim al yumezid. Therefore, it's better to leave it that people should remain. We let the people continue to marry even after they have 2 children, and they're not. There's different pshutim. Either this was only a temporary gzeira, but the point is, people would not listen to such a gzeira, even if we were geyser. So therefore, we don't make such a gzeira to enable people that they don't have the gzeira. If they would, because if you made the gzeira, they become mazid and they would be over b'mezid. Now that there's no gzeira, they're over it. They're not doing the avelos they really should, but it's only a shaygim. Hajan al chesk sabatim. I think this is the longest parak we've ever. The most blot of any parak we've learned so far, and that's Hashem. Tomorrow morning we'll resume.
One question.